Mark Macrae, talking to you about pre-war soaking.
Pre-war soaking, okay. Watch the paper stock very carefully. Experiment with the worst condition card first. The 33 Goudies, do not immerse them. Goudie paper stock is layered, and what will happen is the cards will fall apart. Instead, you want to do the card perhaps with a Q-tip that's moistened. Drop moisture all over those areas to see how the reaction is. Once you determine the adhesive that was used, then you advance to the next level.
Could be water-based, could be chemical-based.
That's right, that's right. LePage's would have been really big. That'll leave a brown stain on the back of them. If it was paste, the paste is reversible by getting the back of the card damp. Paste is simply flour and water, and the flour, when it becomes reactivated by water, will be easier to wipe off, and it usually doesn't damage the paper stock as long as you don't get impatient and start rubbing it like with a Brillo pen. If you just do it gently with a Q-tip, you'll at least improve the appearance of it. In many cases, there's going to be staining, sometimes from the prior owner or the person who initially tried to pull it from a scrapbook. There'll be paper pulls or things like that, but at least it will be more presentable for whoever.
You can move it up the presentation ladder, or maybe 1 to 1.5 if you're that kind of mindset.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Not so much on the condition level, but on the presentation level. Right.
Right. What would you say is a time when you've had a success with something like that yourself, or even a fail? Is there something you tried?
Goudies is a perfect example of that, where
Yeah.
I soaked them. I'd soaked T206s, I'd soaked Zeniths. There's 2 years of Zeniths you don't want to do. 15 and 16 are a special stock of paper. They will turn to mush. And matte finish paper that are absolutely beautiful in top condition, but you don't find them too often in top condition. Oftentimes, however, when they're pasted in the scrapbooks, and again in that era, teens, it's usually paste or wood glue that were used at that time, going back into the 19th century. And what you'll find is wood glue is permanent. You're not going to get that stuff off. So just don't try it. You might want to do a little bit on the back to make it more presentable, but don't get aggressive with it. It's not going to come off. The paste will be reversible because all it is flour and water. You dampen it, the flour becomes reactivated. It'll be sort of sticky to the fingers, like a starchy type, but again, will come off with gentle prodding and such. In some cases, it affects the printing. In other cases, it doesn't. It's really a case-by-case basis. Cards like E120s that would have been pasted in the same album as a Zenith, the Zeniths might come out cleaner. And the additional factor is you don't know what the condition of the card was when it was pasted down. So that's all these things. But generally, like if you get an album with, say, 100 cards, you find the page with the worst condition one, and that's the one you experiment with. Then it'll tell you that if you lose a card, that's the one that it just, it saves the rest of the collection.
Do you have any advice at all around acetone?
Anything like that, I would not recommend using. I have used as a chemical remover for tape, and the stickiness on tape. It is an industrial strength adhesive remover, primarily designed for large-scale equipment to reduce friction and remove gumminess that can affect the machinery. Toluene was also good to remove tape from cards. As toxic and carcinogenic as that stuff is, going back 50 years.
It's 100% each of those things. It's carcinogenic and toxic.
Absolutely. You got to work with it very limited amounts of time, ventilated areas. It's explosive, so you can't have it in a hot, direct sunlight or anything like that.
So outside in the shade?
Outside in the shade for about 20 minutes, because when you start inhaling the fumes, it'll knock you out. And if you get any on a cut, you get problems. I wear gloves when I use it. But the amazing thing is, as toxic and damaging as it is to humans, and how high-powered it is in machinery, it does not damage paper. And that's 50-year testing.
Amazing.
I was told about it in the 70s. I've used it. It's not the cure-all, but it will remove the stickiness. Oftentimes you have to do it twice. So the first time, let's just say you have this card here.
Yep.
In the post-war era, tape was used real commonly. There is piece of tape here, piece of tape there. 1950s era, cheap tape. Oftentimes the adhesive will break apart and leave a stain. So if the stain is there, what you would do is gently get a Q-tip. First you dip the bottom part of the card like that, submerge it into the toluene. It will coat the card. You can gently use a Q-tip. Don't rub hard. You'll take the color of the printing right off. And it takes time on each type of paper stock to figure out what the limitations are. In most cases, it will remove it without too much of a problem. In other cases, it might just reduce the stain. The other side here, maybe it's stuck. There's a stickiness to it. It will 100% remove that stickiness. So it brings it down to where it's more stable to work with. The drying is unbelievable because you get something like this, it looks like water, it's nice and clear. Your card will dry in less than 10 seconds. And if you put it out in an area where there's good light, you can actually see it as the moisture just disappears as it evaporates. It's a weird effect. And it's after it dries, you don't soak it in water or anything else. It does not add curvature to the paper. It does not affect paper stocks. I've done it with probably, at least 100 different sets, not having any particular problems. But like any other card that has some type of adhesive added to it, you have to experiment first. Because even with tape, it's not simply one type of tape that was marketed. There are hundreds of different chemical combinations. There are different combinations in the paper stock and the printing of these cards. And each one of those...
You must be looking at least a dozen different combos just in these familiar cards you have here.
Right. That's right.
Right.
And see the type of adhesive that was used, everything is going to be different. And it's just you store in your mind what not to do. 1941 Goudies, we never used toluene. It takes the color right out of it. So when you go to give it the first bath of toluene, you'll see the toluene turns blue or red or yellow. And I found out, the hard way. It's a very dangerous chemical. There probably are websites that tell you to use caution, and you could probably search online and find some of those, but it's a carcinogen. It's in fact, it's even difficult to find. You need licensing in some states like California to acquire it. But it works the best. It's absolutely the best, and as bad as it is.
For those kind of things, for presentation improvement, for tape and other things where there's a chemical right source.
Unless you know, see, like the toluene, I've been aware of it for 50 years, so I know it's been used, and it hasn't shown any long-term damage or effects on the paper stock. There are other people using different techniques, acetones, and different types of chemicals that are not tested long-term. They might work out fine, but then we might find out, like when people started bleaching Cracker Jacks in the 80s, that if you use more than, say, 1/1000th of a drop of bleach, that will penetrate into the fibers of the paper, disintegrate the starch which holds the paper together. You might have the card in a plastic slab or a container for 5 years, and then you go to pull it out, you accidentally drop it, and the corner doesn't ding, it crumbles, because it's completely deteriorated the stock that keeps it together, much like bleach would do to a brand new white t-shirt. You buy it, it's nice and firm, and wear it once, you bleach it, it takes out the starch, and as you continue to wash it, it starts falling apart. With paper, and particularly with some types of real cheap paper, it accelerates the disintegration process. But again, it's trial and error. I'm not a chemist or a scientist on it, but I've learned the hard way. When you get things like that, it's trying to save it initially. So you might buy something that was in somebody's basement in a scrapbook for 70 years, and it's basically throw out. And you want. I don't like to see things thrown out if they can be salvaged, and that was the original original thing. You start asking people that do things that, what did you do in this situation? Well, this is what I do. First time we did T206s that were in a scrapbook, my friend ripped off a whole page from the scrapbook and threw it in the bathtub and filled it with water. And I'm freaking out. He says, no, because I've done this before. That's the way it's done. And once you learn the technique, it's not so much in the soaking as it is the drying. With toluene, it's almost a miracle to watch. You're looking at this thing, and it just the water the moisture evaporates like that, and it just goes back to its regular color without the sheen in a matter of seconds. And it's dry, and you can get to the touch where it's not going to harm you and such.
As compared to when you do a water soak like you're describing,
3 days.
Press
Yes,
and dry, swap out towels, press and dry, press and dry.
I don't really press per se, because pressing can alter the thickness of paper stock.
Oh, I see.
What I do on mine, it's essentially, once it's soaked, it's usually about 8 minutes, then I'll put it onto blotter paper, and then I'll put like a book on top of it. It's checked after 10 minutes to make sure that all the adhesive was removed and it's not sticking to your blotter paper. Once you're satisfied that you're okay that way, I'll leave it like that for 12 hours with a book on top of it, and then overnight is usually if you do it from 12-hour increments, then once it's dried out, you can change out the blotter paper.